Thank you. It's so nice to be back at the Meacham. I almost feel like I'm family now, and we are family. Seriously, I love the students here, and I look forward to coming to this this writers conference almost every year. It's just been wonderful. So I do feel so at home here, and thank you for inviting Bill and I again. Thanks, Rick. And thank you, Earl. I'm so happy to be reading with Earl and Chad, two of my buddies here, and that's a good thing. So Chad said, start off with a funny poem. And I said, Chad, I don't have any funny poems. How am I going to start out with a funny poem? So I'm going to start out with a really not a funny poem. How about that? Crazy Love has been very, very good to me. It did win the American Book Award last year, and I am very thankful for that. So, I have never read this poem in public before, and it's called Blossoming in Littlest Garden. For those of you that don't know us, Bill and I are from Colorado, and we live in outside a little town called Durango, Colorado, in the Four Corners area, and it has something to do with these poems because a lot of these poems are set in that landscape. Blossoming in Littlest Garden. I pick wild cherries, plump as the fire moon, as I brush through my garden's full blooms. Fuchsia petunias that tongue velvet pasque flowers, pulling themselves erect as silk temples, next to the blousy lips of giant snapdragons, pink cosmos in gauzy frocks, and red geraniums lewd on green stalks. Sky flaunts blue skin spread wide as Lilith, Salome, and Bovary in their prime, opening luscious arms to lift golden eagles, ravens, mountain bluebirds, and vultures alike. This heat-ticked season shouldn't be wasted. I listen for love's slow snores storming our house, and know I want to be entered the way wind bites into wildfire, crackling through sage, or the way the sunset-bellied brook trout strokes her entire body into the muscular current to find upstream. Earth longs for torrents, for rain's knuckles to pound jazz into it after months of sun. And me? Today I am Lilith, open as a garden where insolent fruits and heavy-breasted flowers shake their booty above the snaking roots of trees. Wrapped in a silk robe, the color of wind, I pad inside from the barefoot yard, fertile soil splaying my toes, wild cherries staining my teeth. Sometimes poems have a life. They keep coming back, you know, they keep being reincarnated as other things. And this poem I'm going to read now was just published in Washington, D.C. by the Institute of Foreign Policy Studies. And of all things, yeah, the Institute for Foreign Policy Studies is a think tank in Washington. And before they published it, they said, there's only one thing, we're going to have to ask you to take one word out of the title. And I said, okay. And the title is Bushwhacked, Lines on Global Warming. Guess which word they asked me to take out? The Bushwhacked. They took it off. I don't know. Nobody's thinking about global warming these days, but in Colorado, we've had a drought that's lasted over 10 years, over a decade, and Texas is literally burning up. Texas doesn't have any green grass left in it. We're lucky here in the East. We've been at UTK, my husband and I, for this past year, and we're just soaking in all the green and all the leaves here. Lines on global warming. hopeless as swatting lies out of the White House or trying to put out an oiled field fire with a cup of water, is this war against the grasshoppers, who, when I walk through weeds or rattle the leaves on a pepper plant, leap by the thousands to remind me that power isn't always held by Goliaths, but by the numerous and persistent. I've used up a quart of organic poison the grasshoppers thrive on, sprayed them uselessly with a hose, stomped them into the deck, called them wicked names they ignored, chewing mercilessly through perennials and broccoli, sweet basil and jalapenos alike, shredding even stringy giant white iris leaves, and stripping the raspberry to a single stem. Monstrous gluttony, relentless destruction. I suppose I could scream down hatred from the sky on the idiot leaders who voted against the Kyoto Accord, plead with missing rain clouds, or throw up wailing hands and emigrate. But I was born with that flawed gene of never giving up. Try, try, try again, as my mother said. Still, armored grasshopper faces are set with awful grins of devastation, those harpies of a vengeful god, with his history of boils and wrath. What's left are ragged tomato plants, excreting their own foul scent in this long season of wind and sun, of wildfires and rainless nights. Thinning ozone and locust clouds, we continue to battle, as we do, the plague of rhetoric devouring the green of our lives. I'm going to read a new poem right now. I'll go back to Crazy Love a little later. But I brought this poem to the Meacham last year at this time, and this poem, I was sitting at Rick Jackson's table, and we were trading new poems, and so he made a suggestion to me. He said, you know, he read this poem, and he said, why don't you put some Congolese boy soldiers in it? And I said, okay. And this poem just won a prize, but I can't say what it is because they're not going to announce it till November 15th. But it worked out, so thanks, Rick. It's called Horoscope. In my hand, the bird of fear twists its beak to read the horoscope that predicts its own conquest. Fear that scrapes the gut raw as green curried peas. Fear caught in the sheer winds of torture, capsizing places like Myanmar, where hundreds of unarmed monks are shot or beaten until their flesh is the ripped color of sacred robes saturating capital streets. Take Venus, blood diamond that rises over sun's death. What does it regret? Thousands of nerves frizz, go numb with nothing left to say when knuckles splinter on cheekbones or labia are hot-wired to Delco batteries in the heart's interrogation chambers. Last month the surgeon stripped my brother's esophagus, that chemo-frayed ribbon from his chest, pulled up his stomach like a tender purse, sewed it to the end of his throat. Vietnam combat vet, drenched again and again in Agent Orange, he grew lumps that shaped themselves to one tumor, a topographical map of fear, with hooked fingers squeezing off what he would eat to survive. In my lifetime, there has never been a year without wars acetylene, scorching tongues from young mothers, strapping plastic explosives to its teenage chest, assured of a righteous recliner in heaven, flensing strips of flesh from children to sell in tyranny's global convenience stores. Between the mound of Jupiter and red Saturn, I'd draw deeper my heart line to ferry those Congolese boy soldiers hopped up on amphetamines, hefting M16s taller than their 12-year-old spines, before they can massacre more village girls with whom, in other lives, they might begin to flirt. On Arrowhead Mountain, we measure the size of a cougar's prints in spring mud, crossing elk and deer tracks, kicking up soggy moss as it sprang. From its mangled winter nest, unvanquished, illiterate, the bird of fear still waits. And then I have a book coming out in April of 2012, and I understand there are a lot of books coming out next year, including Rebecca's, so I'm real excited about that. But this poem is included in it, and I want to read it. Is Terry here? Is Terry Harvey here? She's not here? Ah! Okay. Is she coming? Okay. Well, I'm going to read it anyway. It's called On Pigeon Mountain, City of Rocks, because Rick and Terry took us hiking there last year. I can't remember what time of year it was, but I think it was in the springtime. If you've never been down there, it's a beautiful place to hike, by the way. There are huge rocks, and they do rock climbing there. Is there anybody in here? Somebody I met at the party tonight was a rock climber, and I don't know if you've ever rock climbed there, but it's fabulous, giant formations that people climb. On Pigeon Mountain, City of Rocks. There are rocks that are compressed vertebrae of turtles whose shells collapsed eons ago around fear. Fear can leak like radiation into the sea from a breached reactor, some crack in concrete, when the Earth's plates shift in Japan to consume cities and rocks who believed they were solid and real. We learn there is no place on this planet or in space that is far removed. Everything can happen in the blink of a photon shot past Alpha Centauri. Sometimes my heart believes it is too far away from love. Then a friend turns to share water near huge rocks that flex like black vultures from the rattled hills of paradise. Some rocks open their sandstone jaws to the paws of foxes, fissures split deep as knife wounds in their mineral guts. We can't see to their bottoms. Viewed from the moon, boulders the size of inflated elephants would be invisible as our footprints or the black rat snakes bisecting our path. Scintillating vector of darkness is vision blurred by scales left from shedding skin, tongue fiery as a penstemon, quick sipping spore from breeze. This rock is as big as a garage and talks our ears off at dusk when its gray coat glisters like the rind of full moon or a TV screen where rescuers dig through dense strata of icy mud, wrenched metal, tsunami splintered beams, screen that shifts scenes to Libyans blasted by the dictator's bombs in their own streets. How can the battered boundaries of our minds take this in? Some boulders are strewn like three-story mushrooms at the edge of a glacier, smashing mastodons, forests, and ancestors 10,000 years past. What does this have to do with everyday betrayals, the imagined slights we see flicker at the corner of our vision? We are not surprised to meet rocks who resist climbers, trip over confident toes that have taken them for granted, so that inexplicably a veteran climber tumbles thousands of feet, splitting his new ergonomic helmet for an eternity of screams. Across rocks' ridged spines, Rick picks his way with a hiking stick. His hyperextended knee capped with a thick flap of skin drawn down from his thigh, takes no step for granted. Few speak of the lichen-cloaked hermit rocks who recite sutras among Appalachian bluets, polygala, the sticky yellow tongues of honeysuckle. They've stopped reading newspapers for tragedies, fast for centuries, wouldn't hurt a fly or a viper. We nestle against their cold shoulders when humidity sweats sun-struck weeds. Terry and I leave the men and walk around a cliff that is as tall as the Seattle Space Needle, searing loud into the clean fabric of sky. It reminds us of the way our fathers shouted at us, mine after another double shift grinding steel engine parts at the Oldsmobile, hers after whiskey scraped his teeth mean. Both gone now, their lonely spears flung on solar wind between the frigid rush of stars. We laugh, say our bones mimic these rocks, calcified as turtle shells, honeycombed from rain. Speculate on just how long it will take for radiation from the ruined Fukushima nuclear plant to reach us. On the way down the mountain, we stick sandstone chips in our pockets to carry us home. And a cheerier poem. I can't read it, like have a poetry reading without a love poem. So this is for Bill, and it's called All the Way to Angel Fire. Angel Fire Peak is a peak that I can see from my writing room in Colorado, and Angel Fire Peak is down in New Mexico, and it's beautiful. It just sticks up like a little angel. The goldfinch carries sun on his back, brilliant as molten Aztec earrings, all the way from Mexican jacarandas and hibiscus, shimmering to thistle seed I've sprinkled in our feeder. And we believe again in the disappearance of ice, as if a small bird's gossip could melt our winter hearts. Now snow's gone. I can see all the way to Angel Fire Peak. A day so clear there's no mistaking its intentions to allow us some clarity. Even the blue Buddha glows as he smashes my windows. Misery loves smeary glass, loves a horizon sleety and cold. I'd be the gray juniper that wraps around its own limbs, beautifully dead. Wind keeps it singing. Walking the ridge above the Pine River, geese oboeing in oxbows, we follow the trail cut by mule deer, wild turkeys, elk, their scat going fast to dust, to wind, just like us. There is nothing more urgent this morning than the river's silver tongue flicking into itself while it stammers over stones and willow snags. Croaking above us, two ravens flip mid-air to mate. To thaw, we throw off heavy fleece shirts. Whirling up from the San Juan Mountains, Buddha approves. You are lovely, down to the last mole on your chest, and I'd like to lick wind's alliteration in your ear. My heartbeat sun quickened, alert as wild ginger there. And then one more poem for Chad, because he said this is his favorite poem in the book. So this is for Chad. It's called Flying Through Thunder, and I don't know if any of you have ever flown in a small plane over mountains, but over the Rocky Mountains, it's really not a treat. The plane bounces around and bounces around and bounces around and bounces around. And one day, I was flying from Denver to Durango, and it was a particularly rough flight, and even the stewardess turned green, and he, who was a big guy, he looked like a sumo wrestler, was hanging on, hanging on both sides of the airplane. Well, people were screaming. And I thought, well, we're all going down now. No, I don't want to go down now. Anyway, this poem is for my brother, Flying Through Thunder. From expectant sunflowers, mountain bluebirds, western meadowlarks, and the melancholy shadows of their songs in sage, from the spin and groan of the planet, we roar up, bucking through the blue fury of thunderheads on our final leg home. The small turboprop pitches toward glacial peaks, saints gleaming in the lumen of autumn sun, while the pilot warns us that this will be a rough flight. As if we didn't know, caroling on the backs of jet stream storms, that there are few smooth flights. As if we don't read headlines that daily explode the world. Below us, dump trucks erect a Denver landfill into the shape of a Mayan temple, burying the relics of our excess, while lightning cracks its knuckles on the front range and thunder rattles the thin skin of this twin-engine plane, shaking us from our loneliness. Between bellicose clouds jut sheer curtains of light. In this space that freezes our imaginations, we bounce, then drop, through air pockets, rough as alcoholic fists, dry sockets of turbulence. I have no choice but to release any illusion of control, break my white-knuckled grip on steel armrests that would splinter on impact against rock crags that never learned my name. In the row ahead of me, the carefully coiffed woman checks her lipstick as a baby screams, and I wonder at vanity, pitching fragile as a cocoon 20,000 feet above tree line. I think of the passion of poets, holding their hearts like worn ball caps in their bruised hands, defying the spiked teeth of hungry gods, swallowing truth whole before they eat them alive. Even the stocky steward wipes sweat from his forehead, groans as if he's giving birth, when we yaw half over, pushed by stratospheric gusts we are blind to. I remember the way my stomach dropped as a child, pumping my swing higher, pretending I was a pilot bombing enemies, pretending I wasn't afraid. At the acme of my pendulum, the swing set ground against its cement feet, threatening to slingshot me into space, and my brother dared me to jump. His green eyes were wild as a cougar's, voice screeching with the blood of pretend death, hands itching to let go of the chains, and he did. Bombs away, we're hit! Jump, jump, we're on fire, jump! How could I refuse the catapult out of that careening, or foresee that in a few years my brother would be drafted to paratrooper school to ruin his young knees when he landed just off the training mark, preparing for Vietnam? When the enemy found out he attended rallies, preached peace, he was shipped to Da Nang, to dousings with Agent Orange, to the burning of village peoples, to daily mortar attacks and sniper fire, he still fights. Leaping from the swing's apogee, what I sabered most was fear's pure torch, scalding my body as it arced, suspended before the plunge. That moment gravity kicked in, and I knew what real death would feel like. Hanging a long breath in space, astonished at the constellation of my life, coming into exquisite focus. Family, friends, ambition, anger, even love, before everything, like a billowing parachute, dropped away. Now as the plane lunges, engines steady above the continental divide, I regard razor-backed ridges older than memory, vaster than scars. They comfort me in their lack of pity, their indifference to our cares. Perhaps this is all I need to know. It is not until we begin to fall that we learn how sweet the burst of ecstasy, the release. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Bills.